So the Democrats are panicking because their tactic to galvanize voters in favor of Democrats in the midterm election almost immediately backfired. As soon as it was released, it backfired. And so we see this second phase of strategy where Schumer and Collins are now accusing Supreme Court justices, specifically Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, although they aren't saying the name Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett. We know who they're talking about. They're accusing the justices of not even just lying, of perjury.
Mr. President, this is a dark and disturbing morning for America. Last night, a report disclosed that a conservative majority of the United States Supreme Court is ready to overturn Roe v. Wade and uproot decades of precedent affirming a woman's right to an abortion. If this report is accurate, the Supreme Court is poised to inflict the greatest restriction of rights in the past 50 years, not just on women, but on all Americans. Under this decision, our children will have less rights than their parents. The Republican-appointed justices' reported votes to overturn Roe v. Wade will go down as an abomination, one of the worst, most damaging decisions in modern history. Several of these conservative justices, who are in no way accountable to the American people, have lied to the U.S. Senate, ripped up the Constitution, and defiled both precedent and the Supreme Court's reputation.
His words are so absurd. I can't let this one pass. Our children will have less rights than their parents, he said. Which children, Senator Schumer? Are you talking about the children who won't be murdered in their mother's wombs, who won't be killed by abortion? Those children actually will have more rights than unborn children have had in our country since the 1970s. So that's the most absurd statement I've ever heard. The idea that Supreme Court justices are not accountable to the American people is false. Elections have consequences. It is the role of the chief executive, with the advice and consent of the Senate, who are representatives of the American people. The president nominates a Supreme Court justice, and the Senate approves them. These are actions taken by politicians, the president and the Senate, who are accountable to the American voter. So the idea that the judiciary is not accountable to the voter, the judiciary is a consequence of the decisions of the voter. So Schumer knows this. He's just trying to make it seem like you, as the voter, are powerless, that you have no control over what's being done to you. But that's a lie. But then we get to this pernicious argument that Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett lied to the U.S. Senate. So when a Supreme Court nominee is being interviewed by senators, it is tradition that the senators do not ask hypothetical questions. They do not ask, okay, well, when Roe v. Wade comes before you, how are you going to rule on Roe v. Wade? This is tradition that they don't ask that question directly. In fact, if you watch Supreme Court hearings or hearings for Supreme Court justices in the Senate, there will almost always be a question coming from a senator to a nominee that asks whether the president asked them hypothetical questions. So, for example, Kavanaugh would be asked, did President Trump ask you how you would rule on abortion? And the Supreme Court nominee says no, because it's tradition that in these meetings, they are not asked hypothetical, how you would rule hypothetical. And the reason for that is because, well, for this exact reason, because you shouldn't get a seat on the Supreme Court promising to do the political work of a particular party. Your role on the Supreme Court is to interpret the Constitution. And so the tradition is you're asked about jurisprudence. You're asked about past cases. You're asked about your own record or the history of Supreme Court rulings. And so the idea that Kavanaugh or Amy Coney Barrett lied to Collins or lied to Schumer, I mean, this, by the way, is Collins's quote. Collins said, if this leaked draft opinion is the final decision and this reporting is accurate, it would be completely inconsistent with what Justice Gorsuch and Justice Kavanaugh said in their hearings in our meetings in my office. So again, there should have been no question asked about the hypothetical, how they would vote in a case where Roe v. Wade was on the line. So what they're talking about then is the idea of precedent. Collins is famous for asking, well, what is your jurisprudence on settled law? What is your jurisprudence on precedent? Should these competing interests, right? The idea of precedent, there are competing interests. The interest of the Constitution and the interest of making sure that a ruling, even if another court got that ruling wrong, in the interest of the Constitution, then that ruling should be overturned. But those who push precedent or put precedent on a higher pedestal say the competing interest is for stability in the law, even if there's a wrong ruling, at least it's wrongly applied equally. I think it's a ridiculous jurisprudence. We've talked about this before. But Collins, that's where Collins stands. She thinks that precedent is just the top of the top. She thinks precedent can't be overturned. And so that's the question she asks Supreme Court nominees. What is your view on precedent? Do you think it's appropriate to overturn precedent? What is your respect for precedent? And I think the answer, I think you can say that you respect precedent and also understand that when precedent is wrong, not only do you have a right as a Supreme Court justice to overturn it, you actually have a duty to overturn it because your highest loyalty isn't to precedent. Your highest loyalty is to the Constitution of the United States. Obviously, Roe v. Wade is unconstitutional. It was never based in the Constitution to begin with. It was invented. We all know this, leftists and those on the right. Anybody who has a shred of intellectual honesty and any knowledge of the Constitution and the Roe v. Wade ruling knows this. But anyway, the point of this is that Schumer and Collins understand that they're panicking because they understand that that this draft being leaked is not going to galvanize the people that they thought it would galvanize. And so they're taking this into stage 2. They are essentially accusing these justices of lying to the U.S. Senate. Lying to the U.S. Senate is perjury. It's a crime. And the reason that they're accusing these justices, not just of lying, but of lying in the U.S. Senate, which is perjury, which is a crime, is because that could then justify an impeachment of these Supreme Court justices. And that, of course, is what the left wants. They want a packed Supreme Court. They want only leftists on the Supreme Court.